welcome to the first episode of Until the Coffee Runs Out instead of Until the Tea Runs Out because we we haven't had our first cup of coffee yet this morning, but
And it's early, and mine's iced, so that's why I have a straw.
mine is not yet iced. I mean, like, it's brewed, it's still hot. So,
Yeah.
it's gonna be a moment before we catch that up. All right. Jen and I am Ansley Ash, and you are?
And I am JM Guilfoyle, but you can call me Jen. I publish under JM Guilfoyle. And today we are going to talk about. I didn't really have a great name for it. I called it From Reading to Writing because, like, you were talking about, Ansley, how you like when you've been going through and you've been doing these like 25 book, your 25 book challenge. Bringing that, like, what keeps you interested and engaged in what you're reading and how to bring that over to your writing, right?
Yeah, so what prompted this is I was explaining to Jen, so this will be the 125th book that I have reviewed on my side blog that literally nobody reads. And by nobody I mean like 50 people read this thing. And none of them like consistently. So but this is the one this is the one I just finished last night. So this is the one that's going up, or I finished it early this week. And then I finished this one before I get, because these are library books. I don't always get them in order, but like I have an order that I'm publishing the reviews in. So this one marks 125. So I've read and reviewed 125 since 2023, since Memorial Day of 2023. So that's like a lot.
That's a lot.
And yeah, and when I do up that, I was thinking like there are all of these things that I can talk about, like books, like what keeps me engaged, and are there things that I can glean about how the publishing industry writ large has changed over time, right?
Also,
So
I guess like another thing would be like, do you DNF books or what would make you DNF a book and how you apply that to your writing, because like I know I personally DNF books because I'm such a slow reader that, like, if something is not going to hold my interest or if it's really just like I can't stand this, I'm like, I don't have enough time for this. I'm not going to force myself to finish it. I'm going to learn from it and move on.
okay. So no, I don't DNF. There are books I've recently gotten into DNF books, right? Um but no, and like the first book that I did, like I just did not connect to it. Is Stephen King's It. And I got all the way, like, I struggled through the book and I struggled through the book and it's long. And I don't think it's a bad, like, if you're into like what Stephen King writes, I don't think it's a bad book. I don't think Stephen King is a bad writer.
Mhm.
That book was a miss for me, right? And I
Yeah.
got to the end, if you've actually read the book, because the movie version changes the end. And I will not spoil what the end is for you. I was like, no, 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 not this ending. So I was like so mad at it. And that was really, and I was in college at the time, and that was really when I was like, maybe not finishing a book would be better. Like, I think that was the first time I had that thought. So whenever it feels like I'm slugging through it, I do occasionally do it. But to Robin mysteries, I typically stay into with mysteries. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm going to talk about some things that mysteries, and especially mysteries over time, have in common. So one of the things that I noticed is this. So these are Agatha Christie's. Look at how short they, well, that's not Agatha Christie. Look at
That's fine.
look at how short they are, right? Like, this book here is like 205, 6 pages. This one I think is, or one of the longer ones, and it's at 200, 285 pages, right? So, and these are both published in the 50s, right? And I'm like, and so
They
like
were
going
serialized first. Most of her novels were serialized, I think, in the
I mean,
beginning.
last year, right, and so, like, the industry has, like, really changed since then, right, and one of the things that I was thinking of is, like, you can really see how computers have changed the world as you go through and you read. So I'm reading, like, very faithfully going through 3 sets of oeuvres, right? I'm doing Agatha Christie, Anne Perry, and Michael Connelly, right? And so but, like, this is a book that came out, I don't know, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, right? And I mean, like, yes, it's a hardcover, but this is fairly typical of a Michael Conley in that it's 400 and something, 3 398 pages long,
Yeah.
right? So it's like right, and that, like, that's short for Michael Conley. I'm used to them, like, being 410, 420, right? Like this is relatively short for Michael Conley, right? So Agatha Christie does a thing and Anne Perry does not do this. But Agatha Christie and Michael Conley do a thing. Opening chapters are very, very short. The words are very punchy, the sentences are shorter, they get to the action a lot quicker, right?
Well, do they both open with an action, like something very actiony, like it's right? Because generally there's like
Michael
those couple
Conley
of schools of thought, right? Like where you either start with like more exposition-y stuff or you start like in the middle of action to just immediately drop your reader into the action, right?
yeah, so Michael Conley does that. This but I haven't read this one yet. But this book, this Miss Marple book, so like this is one that's going up today. The dead body doesn't show up until page 76.
Wow, that's
And
late.
I know, right? On a 210-page book. So like a third of the way through, right? Like
Yeah.
well over a third of the way through. And it actually opens with our main character, Miss Marple, talking to somebody who doesn't show up the rest of the book. She spends like 10 pages with this like other character, and we develop all of the characters. And I was like, you know what? And this is like even Agatha Christie's first book did this, where like you're in the and she's an engaging, breezy writer, right? And
Mhm.
she gets away with this, but like she definitely introduces you to everybody. Then somebody is dead, so like then you're like, all right, yeah, now we're gonna solve a mystery in the second two-thirds of the book. And that is like one of the biggest differences that I see. So that's what Agatha Christie did. This is Anne Perry's first book, right? Notice how much it has in common with like a typical Agatha Christie. This
Mhm.
first book was published in 79. So you can think, oh, hey, you know what's not it done in 79? Word processors. Word processors have not made it into the publishing industry, right? This book is like,
Or the homes. I
well,
mean,
yeah,
like
not even
uh,
the industry yet. It's 287 pages, which is long for a first novel,
mhm.
of this ilk. It's long for a first novel, but it's still shorter. Like it's the same size as this other one than this is, and so like
Yeah, but
we're thinking
back then, they were still probably using typewriters to type their manuscript.
and Agatha Christie was like, "What do you mean I need 60,000 words?" Right? Like she wanted to write the novella length. A lot of them were serialized, and she wanted to write the novella length, and they're like, "We contracted you for a novel that means 60,000 words." And I was like, no wonder like Nana was confused because Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is famously like 50-ish thousand words, which is where they got the nano thing. And I was like, it's an older book. Like, yeah, novels used to be that. And I was like, I think it's not just a cultural thing. I think like I think honestly this is just corporate greed, like reaching in there, right? The longer book by a bigger author, you could charge more money for it. And if you're selling more of these, then you're gonna sell more longer books by people who sell better and take
Well,
fewer
also, if
people.
she's serialized, think about it, like, there's more chapters that are in the publication that it is first serialized in that are then selling those before you go and publish the physical book when it's done.
And you can tell that Agatha Christie has been serialized because her chapters are far shorter than anything. Like Anne Perry is notoriously bad. I mean, like her chapters, the book I'm reading right now, this one, Execution Doc, chapter 3, which I made it through last night, is 35 pages. Like 30, like it's a long chapter. Um, just what, like, I don't know, seven or
But I've
eight
also
thousand words.
noticed, like, I mean, like, depending on the author, there are just some authors that have shorter chapters as, like, their thing, like, that's how they write.
It is a little bit like and where they concentrate the action and how frequently they, change between points of view, right? So
Yeah.
Michael Conley and Anne Perry change point of view in their novels very frequently. They
Mhm.
write in third person typically. Agatha Christie writes in third person most of the time anyway, but her chapters just tend to be really, really short. But all three of them write in close third person, but Agatha Christie keeps with a very set number. So, like, if it's a Hercule Poirot novel, you're gonna see Poirot almost all the time, and then, like, occasionally, if you need information that the police are gonna have, then you'll get it from, like, the police inspector's point of view, which is what happened. It's a Miss Marple, but it's what happened in this book, right?
Mhm.
Anne Perry, she takes you where the action is, like, so
Right.
wherever the action is, you're with that person. So like that chapter 3 that's 35 pages, that, it's a couple. It's like this is around a couple, a guy who's this just drives me nuts. I don't know what it is with like why am I crooked?
You're
Okay.
fine. You're fine.
It just drives me nuts. But, yeah, so Hester makes her first appearance in chapter 3 where her husband, William, is already, like, investigating the murder, and we don't know how Hester's gonna tie into this or what her subplot is gonna be, but we're 35 pages into her subplot, and it's kind of a moment to, like, let the mystery breathe, and you're like, "Oh, we love Hester," because Hester's, like, so, um, integral to the plot. So, yeah. So, yeah, so those were just some things that I noticed, but also you can see how books are priced differently over time, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
this book, Buckingham Palace Gardens, it's a paperback. I bought it used for like $15. Copyright on this is 2008. So I would say this is probably like a first edition paperback, so like the first printing of the paperback version, right? Um, $8, $7.99, right?
I missed that, right? Like, that was, like, the mass market price. Remember those mass market books that were all, like, those shorter, well, not shorter, but, like, smaller, and, like, they were almost always, like, between 5.99 and what, 7.99?
Well, and I talk about this growing up and back when books were everywhere and I could go to my local drugstore and, like, it was called Drug Emporium, right? Like, it was the only one, it was, like, sitting there. They had this fantastic row of, like, books, and you could get mystery, and you could get thriller, and you could get tons and tons of romance. I bought tons and tons of my romance reading stuff from there, when I was reading all of my smut, right? But, like, it was, like, $5, right? And when I was a teenager growing up, $20 a month was my allowance. I could go buy 1 book a month and be happy, right? Like, I could walk to the store if I needed to. I could pick up my book, and I could pick up a book that I was gonna read, and maybe I would read it through 2 or 3 times in that month and then go get a second book, you know? So, yeah. So, I think $8 is not a bad price, alright? Why is for yesterday? So this is, Sue Grafton's last novel. Don't remember when this came out, but she died a few years back. So 2017, right? And the difference between them, right?
Mhm.
Like 10 years, right? This book, 9.99.
Oh, yeah, and now you go to, like, hardcovers are like, last time I was at
I
Barnes& and
didn't
Noble,
bring
like, everything was hardcover first, and they were minimum, like, $30.
Yeah, I was gonna say I didn't bring my Michael Conley, the Detective Stowell that I picked up. It was on sale. So, like, they were blowing it out. They had, like, overstock on that one, and so I picked it up for, like, $6 or something like that, but the cover price on that is $30. I
Yeah,
don't even remember. Like, I picked it up for so cheap, I don't even remember how cheap it was. But
yeah.
this book, which I bought used online, this is my favorite one. I keep buying this book and giving it away and buying this book and giving it away. We had that, right? And it's a used book, so, like, I had to, like, squint through there, but it says 17.99, right? And so, like, this thing is probably published in, like, I don't know, since the pandemic, so call this 2022 because it's clearly been read, right? $17,
Mhm.
$8, like, in a de in 15 years, like, that
I mean,
yeah.
we know that printing prices have gone up, right? Like, the cost of paper has gone up, the cost of printing has gone up, which is wild. Um, I just had gotten that message, on Amazon, end of spring, that they were raising the prices again, and so that if you had books priced under a certain amount, you should raise the price because otherwise you would get 0 royalties. So I had to, like, go in and increase the price of, I think, Dark Spell, because I think it was, like, at that price point where it would have gotten 0 royalties if there were copies sold. It is. It's really hard. But I think you wanted to also talk about, like, a lot of, like, when we're reading this stuff, like, what we take away from it that we can then use in our own
So,
writing,
yeah,
right?
so that was the thing, right? So, like, Agatha Christie and Michael Conley, the you know, 100 years apart in time, right, in writing, 100 years. And yet and even though his chapters are longer than hers, right? Shorter chapters, shorter sentences, and the exposition or the si and the exposition that gets put in there are in very short contained bursts, right?
Mhm.
And typically asked as a question that they're gonna like answer later. And
And it's
so
kind
like
of the necessary details, right? Like, it's not like the Tolkien extensive 5 pages about the forest details.
yeah, I know. I like yeah, yes, I love Tolkien. I mean, like I to be that lush. I mean, that it is the Lord of the Rings is a literary work of art. The Hobbit is
It is,
fantastic.
and I have mad respect for him and all of the world building he did and the hard world building and the creating languages. I personally, A, cannot do that, and B, I do not have the mental fortitude to read 5 pages about a forest. Um,
I cannot
or
embrace somebody for talking about a single blade of grass. I'm gonna be like I can't write that. So, okay, so
Right,
um,
but, like, with the shorter sentences and with the shorter exposition on things, like, I
and
know that's
then
common in mystery, but, like, that's also common in YA, which is something that I tend towards because of those I don't wanna say lighter details, but, like, the necessary details.
well, and I think it's something that YA authors picked up from mystery writers, right? Because this is something that I see in mystery writing all the time is that it's a very few necessary details enough to get you intrigued, but like the answers are gonna like so like the detailed details are gonna be at the back, right?
Yeah.
The second thing is that, and then you get this what we consider the mushy middle. These are relatively speaking, for whatever author you're talking about, relatively long chapters, right? You settle into the characters. There's more interaction between the characters. They do a lot of their character building work in these sections,
Mhm.
and they make everything this is your classic, make it an argument, make it a this, make it a that, right? Like, put the tension in there. So if you have to drop a piece of narrative detail in there, you do it in an incredibly tense way. So
Yeah.
in this book is classic. So main character is a newspaper well, he's been a newspaper reporter, he's now an online reporter. Michael Connelly clearly has stuff to say about the industry because he's written 3 novels about this. And I think there's a novella. So I've read all 3 novels, but I think there's a novella in here where there's like a blow up between him and his always girlfriend in this thing because they're broken up, and he keeps talking about how he went to this thing, and like I'm like, I don't remember any of this. And I haven't read it. I've read only the novels, not the novellas. I might go back and pick up the novellas, but I think I'm missing one. When I'm in here, right? He opens this up the way this guy so the characters hunt serial killers as he's hunted 2 successfully. He ended up in the middle of one because his twin brother was shot and killed by a serial killer the first time. His brother was a cop. He's an investigative reporter. He's the one who figured it out.
This is like
Book
Criminal Minds, sorry.
It wa no, it's actually very Criminal Minds. Before Criminal Minds was Criminal Minds, it's called The Poet. And so the first book in that series is very clearly Michael Connelly was a crime reporter, and he picked his butt up and he moved from like Miami to LA because he got on with the LA Times, and he wanted to talk about all these famous serial killers that had happened in LA, and then he said it differently. But anyway, so this guy gets sucked into a serial killer case because a woman that he had a one night stand with was murdered by a serial killer, and the cops come to ask him about, like, "Did you know her? Yes. Did you have sex with her? Yes. How many times did you have sex with her?" He's like, like, "Twice, but just the one night," like, so, like and it's so interesting, and so, like, he's clearly a suspect, like, he's after the story to clear his name, right?
Mhm.
And about halfway through, like, the everybody, who's reading the book, we know the character, we know Jack didn't kill him, but, like, about halfway through, they finally get him cleared, but then Jack is the one who's developed all the leads, so, like, they take that point and they pivot it and they twist it, and by this point, we know the serial killer is hunting Jack as well, so
Mhm.
that's this book.
Yeah.
Um, I don't remember this one. I'm gonna read that one in the future.
But with, like, the mushy middle, like, I mean, first of all, like, I feel like mushy middle has 2 definitions here, right? Because, like, when we're writing, I know writers talk about the mushy middle where essentially they have nothing going on and things can kinda get mushy in the sense of it's not maybe clear what needs to happen, to drive your story forward. Your characters may be a little aimless because um, especially if you're drafting or whatever, right? Like you're discovering the
Or
story for yourself as you're writing,
well,
right? Um, Were you meaning mushy middle in like a different way?
No, I am talking about that because I do
Oh,
think even books that get published do tend to sometimes have a very mushy middle
yeah.
where the author is still lost and wondering because the beginning is very clear and
And the end
the
is very
climax
clear.
is, yeah, and the ending is very clear. The climax, the ending action is very clear, but they're in the middle where you're doing your character development work, right?
Yeah.
And Michael Conley solves it by what he does is he does a resolution. So you build towards this resolution of Jack getting cleared, and that happens about halfway through, right? But like you're like, can he stay on the story? Can he, like all of those things that he wants to talk about. Those things he does a resolution in the middle of the book, and then he moves forward. But at this point, like the professional danger is over, but the personal danger isn't, right? And
Mhm.
so it shifts the danger, which I thought was an interesting approach.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm currently in the middle because I am going later today to see the Demon Slayer movie, and so I have been
That's
blitz
fine.
reading the manga. 23 manga. I've read 20 manga in just over a week.
I'm so proud of you.
That
I'm
is
so
a lot.
proud of you. Yeah, I'm so proud of you.
That is a
That's
lot.
super
And it's interesting because story-wise, so, like, obviously the mangas tend to be more condensed than, like, when you're watching an anime and stuff. And the anime nowadays, anime tends to wait for the manga to catch up. So you don't have, like, maybe the story inconsistencies as much, right? Because they can either fix slight things in the anime because now the manga has come out, or if they're gonna go completely away from the manga, they're gonna go completely away from the manga, unlike the whole like Tokyo Ghoul mess where they caught up to the manga and then they kept going and they made their own thing and it was terrible. And then it
I
was
love
nothing
when
like
that
the manga.
happens.
But like so it's interesting. So like for example, like before this movie, which is the final arc, right? Which is gonna be 3 movies long. Um in the manga, they had a short training arc where they were training the main characters before they were going to go fight the big bad at the end, right? And in the manga, it was relatively short. It was maybe a manga out of the 23, like 1. Now, this final battle, as far as I understand it, is 2 full manga with just the final bad guy. It's a pretty long fight. Um, but the anime made an entire, I think, season of this training arc at the to lead up
Right.
into this, and people complained about the pacing, right? Because it is the mushy middle type thing. Um, but you do get that character development, right? Because like there's so many characters that you don't know that much about. And so the main character going around and meeting each one of them and doing training with them gave you that connection that you didn't maybe necessarily have before. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
interesting because like people always complain about those slow periods, but those slow periods are where authors get that chance to explore character development because you can't really develop your character too much if they're running for their lives constantly.
Yeah. So that was how Michael Conley did it. Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. You're right. You're right. And I think that's maybe something that okay. I would say these 2 books did it a much more traditional way, right? So this book, you show up, you meet a character who's like, and then she doesn't show up the rest of the book. But she asks the question. She goes, "I think somebody's trying to kill my sister," right? And so you get in there, and Miss Marple goes to see whether or not somebody's trying to kill the sister, right? And so that's how you get through the first 70 pages. You're like, I'm like, what are you doing here? Why isn't this woman dead yet? Right before the first body shows up. And spoiler alert, it is not the woman that they think is going to
Mm,
die. It's not the body who died. So like plot twist, right? So like she gets a third of the way through, plot twist, right? We're getting into what's considered that mushy middle. And then I did hear all about the day in which read and reviewed all of these books. They were like, "Oh, this book slogs through there," and I was like, "I don't feel like that," but I was like, "Girl, you have not you've not read things that slog. If you think this book slog, like this, like, you know." Although I will say, like, I tend to read every single day, and it was easier to put this one down for like 2 days when my life got super busy than it was for others. So maybe it did slog. I don't know.
yeah, maybe.
I just didn't think that it did, right? And then, so, like, then you go through another third, and then another body shows up, and then we have our resolution in the last third.
Yeah.
This book opens in a parlor scene. She's setting, a Victorian thing, and, she's a very cantankerous grandmama character in here. And
Wait, when was
Grandma,
that one? When was this Ann Perry one written?
this is Ann Perry, The Cater Street Hangman. You can see
Approximately. When was it written approximately?
it was published in 1979. I don't know when
Okay.
she got it done.
I'm
Um,
just trying to gauge, like, the difference between that and the Agatha Christie book. Oh, no. Your video went out.
I know because oh, am I back? Okay, I'm back. I'm sorry.
You're back.
I got a phone call. My friend is having a crisis moment, but we will
It's
get
okay.
back to
I've gotten, like, my dad called me and I, like, swiped out.
I'm like, "Decline, decline, decline," and they're like, "You mean you wanna accept it?" I'm like, "No, decline." Oh, that would've been, like, so horrible if I had been like, "Sorry, Travis, I'm on a live stream right TF now, and I can't talk to you in the middle of this live stream." Travis is amazing. He's one of my best buddies. Okay, so this book was published in '79. I don't know when it was finished. I do know that she was in her mid-40s when it or she was, like, 40 when she got picked up by a publisher. Anne Perry has a very interesting story. But this is a very oh, this is my personal book. This is never going anywhere. I was like, "Oh, hang in here." Anyway, so I read this. So this one, and it shows up, and so she does this thing where she starts the scene in the middle of an argument. In the middle of an argument that you don't know why it's relevant. And then all of a sudden you find out that there has been it's Victorian England, they don't talk about these things. A murder in the street, right? And they're telling their
I
aunt
mean, to
who's
be
been
fair, even here, if there was a murder in the street, we would all be talking about it, but it would
well,
be
okay, but they're all talking about it without talking about it, right? And finally, one of the daughters, the grown-up daughters who's still living at home, turns to her aunt and goes, "There was a murder." And they're like, "Oh, you're not supposed to talk about these things," right? So, like, you hear about the thing, and then, like, you move on, and then boom, you get another murder. Like, almost immediately, you get another murder. And then after that, there are, I think, 5 murders in this book. But yeah, so you get so, like, she drops a murder. She doesn't like, Anne Perry had no clue how to structure something. And what makes this book really interesting is that, 1, it is written from the viewpoint of inside of a family that is suspected of murder. And if you know anything about Anne Perry actually did commit a murder when she was a teenager. So she's been there when the cops came in to question her and her mom and her dad and her
talk
brother.
about right what you know.
I know, right? Like, it was totally right what you know. And there are also, people have gone through and analyzed, there are definitely things that some of the murderers do that they think were employed in the singular it was a gruesome, grisly murder, by the way. And if you've seen the movie Heavenly Creatures, yes, it's exactly that murder. This is exactly who it is. It's exactly that murder. Um, so, yeah, so this book and she drops a body. So I think there are like 4 or 5 murders in this. She drops a body, each one getting closer to, basically the girl who's our main character here, right? So it gets closer and closer inside the house, and it like, is it actually somebody that they know? But if you have read your Agatha Christie's, if you have read all of your British murder mysteries, then basically what you have is, you're gonna figure you should be able to figure out who it is, and yet I was shocked. I still read this book, and I know who the murderer is, and I'm still shocked every single time. It's like Sixth Sense I get. Um,
So what are the things that you bring when you are reading
yeah,
these things?
how frequently to drop a body, right? Like, Agatha Christie just drops a body. Like, you have your traditional, I think, murder mystery. I think it does not happen this way in real life. Um, Michael Connelly states being a crime reporter, he sticks much more to the facts, right?
Mhm,
And so as things get closer to his suspect and as evidence begins to come in, so it's a very police procedural, he's very accurate in that. As they're figuring out who it is and as they're collecting their evidence, the questions of whether or not the psychological dimension of the cop making sure that they're right goes
mhm,
on there, right? Or the argument where the brass, and like the difficulties that it is, the procedure part, what makes the procedure difficult. In a Mickey Holler, it's whether or not they've actually got the right guy and whether or not Mickey can argue his way out of it.
mhm.
But how frequently to drop a body, right? Agatha Christie, a third, a third, a third. A third, a third. In the beginning,
Yep,
if she starts in the beginning, in the beginning, a third of the way through, 2/3 of the way through, keep going.
yep,
And that kind of keeps people interested. It's like, oh, we're going along, and who could it possibly be? And then you murder a suspect. And I think that's a very normal mystery book kind of a thing to do. Is like
mhm.
you have a victim, and then you murder somebody that you think is that you think is a suspect, right? Because again, that person like maybe knew something or whatever. And Christie does this fantastic thing where she murders somebody in the beginning who's not the intended victim; it's a practice victim, and then she murders a suspect later, but the suspect is the intended victim all along. And you have to figure out like the first person to die, were they meant to die? Why did they die? Sometimes that person is killed off in advance before the actual murder takes place because they knew the murder was going to take place. So the murderer kills somebody to prevent them from stopping them. So I think that's interesting. The rest of these are, and then later on in the Character Hangman series, Inspector Pitt moves on to it's political thrillers. So then it's like, are they going to catch? And it's back in Victorian time, the anarchists before they blow something up. So it's very much that ticking time bomb keeps
Yeah.
going through there. And then her other series, that I read, this is also Victorian, but it's much earlier in the Victorian period, so the 1850s. It's more procedural, but it is really like how dark crime was in the 1850s. Anne Perry had a lot to say about it and how
Mhm.
far people went and how like because there wasn't the same level of forensic, people lied to themselves about whether or not the person who did the murder, and there are all kinds of
I mean,
obfuscations.
you see that today, though. You know,
You do, you do.
I mean, that's
Um,
where human nature and the um the psychology of relationships and stuff like that. Like you see that even in so like again because I'm reading Demon Slayer, so that's set in Taisho era Japan, which is not as far away as you would think. Even though they're using swords and stuff, Taisho era ended in 1920. So you're talking about something that's set about 100 years ago. Um, and you have people again because it's horror esque. Like you've got people becoming demons, and you do get like the psychology of like these people, like especially in those backstories that are really traumatic. Like um, I'm not gonna say which character because then it would be spoiling, but, like, one of the demons, like, part of the reason he became a demon was he expected to die. He was a twin. He was essentially told, like, "The thing that happened to you means you're not gonna live past 25," and then there's a whole thing about the jealousy between him and his twin brother because his twin brother ends up being a prodigy as a swordsman. Um and, he essentially became a demon so that he could live longer and, like, surpass his twin brother, and then never still does, you know?
yeah. See,
And
I mean,
that's
and I
fascinating.
think and those human but that human element, right? Like, that's the thing that
Mhm.
I bring into it. All 3 of these books, for mystery, and Agatha Christie is, like, famously ridiculed about how her books are plot driven and, like, she worries more about the mechanics than she does about the what but I have found that in the 40 whatever books that I have read of hers to just not be true. Like, it just is not
Well well
true.
well, here's the thing, I mean, a story is either plot driven, character driven, or setting driven. I mean, it's gonna be driven by something.
It is, right? I mean, and I think mystery gets this rap because it does have to fit. Like,
Mhm,
if somebody like, you can't have your murder victim live, right? Like, it's not a murder mystery then if your
right.
victim lives. Um, although not every mystery that I write is a murder mystery. I do
Yeah.
some kidnappings, I do some heists,
I mean, I'm writing a murder mystery where the murder didn't actually happen, I guess, but
that's different. That's different because, like, he saw a body, right? Like, so, like,
he
the
did
victim
see a
is
body. Where's the what happened? Why did he think he saw his dad? Sorry, anyway.
y'all
That's
should
just
go
science
read that.
fiction, so.
Go read Shutdown Syntax, okay? Like,
I'm
you get
reading on
into that.
chapter 9. I'm so excited.
I know, I can't wait. I can't wait for you to be done so, like, I can go through and, like, really read it and just, like, sink
I can't
into it.
wait to actually publish the whole thing. Sorry. Anyways, that was a total side tangent. Um, I think it's interesting. I think that you could say in general though, like mysteries and even procedurals are very plot driven, right? Because in general, like that's kind of the reason you're there is you want to figure out what happened. Like it's not character driven in the same way that like a romance is character driven, right?
I
But you see
I
it in procedural TV shows where they start out very plot driven, and like let's say by like season 7, it becomes less about the plot and then more about these characters you've been following for 7 years.
I mean, how many times have the main investigators gotten married?
Yeah.
Those castle, half the
Like
cast of Criminal Minds, you know? I mean,
like you follow Grissom and Sarah's like relationship and stuff and
CSI, yeah, I totally left that one out.
I
Yes.
I love CSI.
No, I totally I just blanked on that one.
I think
Um,
my father just came in and we're still on this.
we're still on the thing.
That's okay.
Well, my
Um,
coffee is almost done if you're like
my coffee is still going.
okay. So we still have, like, a little bit of time. Hi,
Yeah,
Jen's dad.
he
Welcome
can't
to the
hear. He's in another room. It's fine. But I'm gonna close the door.
this is so us, like, our lives are just chaotic like this. It's just, like
Right? Um, but so like what things do you bring in? Like, are there specific
I
things
bring
like
3 things I bring 3 things into it. The first is that even though mystery has to be by definition, as we just sat here and spit, however, um, the characters are what draw people in, so your character
Mhm.
needs to be as well developed as anything. Although, listen, I do not understand people who plot their freaking romances. I can't every single one of them.
I
I'm like,
plot my romance?
um, no,
I guess
to
it's just because
certain
I need to know where I'm going, right? Like I need to know what I need to write next. But
well, that's a but you guidepost plot yours. Like it's not like you're gonna say like in chapter 11, like I feel like you plot yours in like oh like at that moment where like the darkest night of the soul or whatever just before the reconciliation you're like oh yeah they're gonna have a big blow up over stuff right and then like whatever had come up and you add the stuff in later. That's what I mean by like
yeah,
enhancing it. Like, I don't ever know I just don't know personally what like, I
sorry.
talk about dogs. It's her dogs today, some days it's my dog. It's like, fun times, guys. I just talk to her like, "Mom, you've been on this live stream forever, pay attention to me."
No, it's because she heard my dad and she went to bark because I closed the door and she couldn't get out to go say hi to my dad.
Yeah. "Mom, you're being mean to me.
Right?
Stop paying
Oh,
attention to your live stream and pay attention to only my needs."
yeah, I think some of the things that I take
But
away.
that character development, I think it was a good
Yeah.
thing for me to write romance. Because that character development, how to have those fights, I could like so like romance novels, and I quit reading them when I realized that like at the plot of every romance novel ever is like boy meets girl, boy and girl, or boy meets boy, girl meets girl, right? But classically, boy meets girl, right? I don't care what you read, but like a significant other meets significant other, alien meets alien, whatever, right? They meet each other. They do nothing but argue, but secretly that means they're attracted to each other. They blink their brains out. They keep fighting over these things. They have this huge big fight. They come back together like, oh no, we really love each other. We can smooth this all over. And I realized that like I stopped reading them because my oldest children are girls and I wanted them to have healthy relationships and I was like, "You know what? Maybe me worshiping at the rom-com altar, me reading the romance, whatever, like this is not I think it wasn't bolstering my relationship with my spouse, right? Because things that make a successful marriage are increasing your calm, being open and receptive, understanding that just because you have a disagreement doesn't mean you have a conflict, right? Whereas romance and stories are conflict driven. And I've said this in other places, I'm going to say it other places too. Conflict is for your novel, not for your family, right?
Well, but it's interesting because when you that like that's very typical of American romances or Western romances. But I read a lot of and watch a lot of Eastern romance and slice
And
of
those
life,
are very
which is very different,
yeah,
right?
it is.
Because like yeah, there's conflict, but there tends to be lower amounts of conflict. Um it's usually a miscommunication type thing. And you tend to see different tropes coming up in them. And it's less about the breaking up, getting back together aspect of it, right? Like a lot of times, like some of the most popular like Eastern romances, like let's say like Horimiya, like there's very little conflict in the characters getting together. It's more about the discovery of each other, and them learning about each other, and that's where the story comes in. And but that's also a slice of life, so it's not conflict driven, but also Eastern storytelling methods, which I went through in my I did that series, remember last year, and on my Substack where I went through different like story methods, story archetypes or whatever that are around the
Mhm.
world.
I loved it, read it,
Yeah,
loved it.
it was fantastic, right? But in Western storytelling, is conflict driven. It is not that way around the world. And it's fascinating because like those types of stories, and I've talked with other authors at conferences and conventions that I've spoken at, that like they will write in like let's say various like Eastern style methods, and they don't sell well, or they didn't sell well before, but they're starting to pick up. And like you're seeing that, let's say like the cozy, quote unquote, cozy, story types like legends and lattes. And you're seeing people embrace those Eastern story types, but not knowing that they're embracing those Eastern story types if they're not into anime and manga. You know what I mean? Like it's
Agreed.
fascinating because like it's so different. Like if you read something that's from like a Western or an Eastern point of view.
Yeah, and I have not read as much of it maybe as I should, but I am aware that it is coming out there. I am aware that, that Eastern, I like there are several, like, really interesting, like, movies that I've seen that are more about that awakening, that moment of awakening, that moment of gripping. And actually, the best book that I read was written by a Korean author and translated into English, called The Investigation by Jane Lee. And do you know this? Like, there's so many people with that name that, like, finding that guy in that book is so freaking hard because, like, it's the only one that was translated into English. We are all worse off because we're not reading more of his stuff. But apparently he didn't make it in America, and there's like some fantasy, Eastern fantasy guy who like does whatever. So yeah, I learned a lot about pacing,
Mhm.
keeping my reader engaged, how long my sentences should be. I tend to write really long sentences, but like how to hold those in there, how to get them shorter. The median length of a paragraph, like I've shortened considerably after reading Agatha Christie and Michael Conley and Perry Will Ruin You Forever.
Even Gwen has said like the my writing style, I tend towards that as well, where I write like shorter paragraphs, more similar again also to like YA novels. Something that I've picked up that is very again inherent in things like anime and manga is revealing backstory in like flashbacks. So I tend towards flashbacks, which you don't tend to see as much of, I think, in Western storytelling. But like,
Confess to the woman that like had a novel that like half of the plot revolved around all the dang flash there.
but it's fine. I mean, again, Demon Slayer. As I'm reading it, like you're getting the backstory of these characters in these flashback moments, and they're heart wrenching. But like, I I have picked up on that, and like because I don't want to do the like info dump, right? Like, and that is something that I've seen in like authors that are maybe newer, but like they've created, especially because I'm in that sci-fi fantasy world more than mystery, like you are. um People will tend to take like all that really cool world building that they got very excited about and they made all this stuff,
Still doing mystery.
and then they want to dump it somewhere, right? And like then you get these prologues that are very long and maybe not necessarily useful. Like what is the information that the reader actually needs from that?
Well, so like the piece that I wrote for the for an anthology that I'm in this year, um the final piece ended up being like 2,500 word ish. The first one was nearly 5,000 words, right?
Big
Um
difference.
that it was a
Okay.
huge difference, right? But it's written in first person narrative. But it goes through and it tells about how she'd fallen in love. I don't know. She tells herself that she didn't have the courage to fall in love with this guy when she met him in high school, right? Like he was the high school loner, and she was like the popular cheerleader, and she felt like, like, oh, that I can't. There you are. You're done. I'm done. I
Fun.
finished. So we'll do it. Anyway, she felt like she couldn't do she says, "I'm done with this." And I cut all of that backstory out. And, like, so you meet and they talk about how they knew each other a little bit in high school and, like, she knew he was attracted to her, but whatever. And he didn't know that she knew. But, like, I do that in, like, 3 sentences instead
Mhm.
of, like, that entire buildup of, like, his character. But I needed to know who his character was. So, like, I do that the first time through, and then a lot of it gets taken out. I tell my friends who are writing it, especially the newbie writers, I tell them all the time. I'm like, "Do it anyway. Like, stop listening to all of us to tell you not to do it. You need to do it, and then what you need to do is you need to figure out how to, like, take that stuff that you needed to know and slide it into the book." And you know what?
Yeah.
Here's the thing, that
Or to
she writes
pull it out and that you don't need it, you know?
right, and there's and I think, like, Anne Perry writes historical fiction, and that's the thing that I took from her, is because there are things that she wants you to know, you need to know, right? This book talks about the dangers of Prince Albert died of typhoid, right? And that changed the sewage system in London. She writes this book, there's danger about, like, digging those tunnels, for the sewers in there. There's a lot of info dumping going on in there, but she slides it in drip by drip by drip
Yeah.
by drip by drip, and she gives it as part of the story arc,
Well, but
and she
then
makes
that see, that's not info dumping because info dumping would be really like having 5 pages of just talk about the sewers, you
so
know? Whereas
in
you're
the
dripping that in, that's the way you wanna do it because that keeps your reader engaged.
that's
I'm
that's
talking about people who do pages and pages of history that you don't need.
okay. So she didn't wanna be a mystery writer. She was told by her stepdad to become a mystery writer, because, like, I've read her fantasy work. It is nothing
Was
but
her
children.
fantasy work before mystery?
No, 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 it only got published because, like, the the
Oh,
mystery
okay.
book the mysteries got published and she got famous enough to do it, but holy cow, those books were hard to read.
And, you know, it's interesting. I know that we both run out of copy. It's interesting because you and I have experienced this probably too, because we've been editors on our writing group's anthology. Well, at least I did when we did Denizens of the Deep. There were a lot of people who ended up going towards the fantasy and sci-fi aspect of things because of the theme that we had, and most of them were not. I dropped my dice. Most of them were not used to writing fantasy and sci-fi. And so for people to change genres like that, which is interesting because, like, clearly I change genres all the time. I've written fantasy, sci-fi, romance, general fiction. Like
Mystery.
I go through like a lot of different things. So for me, changing genres isn't super hard, but like for some people it can be so hard. And then they get to that point, right? Like they write some really cool fantasy stuff. And they're like, oh my God, I have this really great world. And then they put it
And
all
and
in.
they don't know how to and they
And
don't
then
know
they
how to
don't have a story, right? Because then they put all their history instead.
yeah. I think, like, and honestly, Anne Perry ran into that, like, totally and completely over and over again. And I think what happened was this is why she worked in mystery. She had these things she wanted to talk about, and this love of history that she wanted to bring into all of her work, and her having to produce a body every 5 pages or whatever. Her having to do that gave the structure so that she knew how to regulate her information in, and, I think, honestly, if you don't know how to do it, pick up a book or 2. It doesn't have to be Anne Perry, but pick up a book or 2 that is historical mystery fiction, right? Where, like, that's a specific, genre. Because, but although you can pick up a historical romance too, right? I mean, because, like, obviously, some of those people have done tons and tons of research, um, into what people wore, and that does not come out as it does in Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind solves how do you set it in Civil War America? You have the classic scene with, Scarlett getting dressed and having the argument with Mammy, right?
Mhm.
So, like, you see the layers of the clothes, you see what, like,
Mhm.
that kind of culture was like, right? In a historical romance, where do you get, how people were dressed? Yeah, when they're taking it off. Um,
I mean, yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
and it's a way to kinda slow down that it's a way to, like, both info dump and to slow down that scene. So there are things you can pick up everywhere. Alright, I'm out of coffee, you're out of coffee,
I'm
we're
out of
both
coffee, you're
finished.
out of coffee, we're all out of coffee. I've just got demons on the brain right now because I'm going. I've got like an hour. Hour. I have an hour until I see Demon Slayer Infinity Train Part 1.
Okay, so I'm gonna
I will
let you
write a review later. That will be out this evening. I will write a review.
yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and go now, and, we would love to tell you we'll be back in 2 weeks, but the reason why we're several days late this week is because our lives are insane. So,
We're both parents, you know.
we're parents,
How it works.
and just normally our lives are insane, so, alright. So, we will try to be back in, like, a week
A
and a
week and a
half,
half.
but who knows? Stick around. See you
Fingers
next
crossed, right? Bye.